think it comes with a prescription order from CVS. And then for those of you who are a bit crazy about the rules, we have this, which gives you 4 or 5 explanations for every rule that's in there. None of them are answers, they're just explanations. And so my rule to start tonight is, if you have a question, ask it. The language is so much different now from the way it used to be, that if you have a question, ask it so we don't get confused when the language changes. Anything to start? Okay, let's go. Here's what we're going to go through. The words of art, definitions. When you get your player's guide, look at the definitions. Some of the words in the book are meant to be specific to the game of golf, and they're not common knowledge language, common knowledge definitions. It's important to read them. And we'll go through a few of them in a moment. The spirit of the game and etiquette is now part of the rules. That was never the case before. If somebody was a bad actor, you could disqualify them, but you couldn't penalize them under the rules. Now there's a suggestion, a very strong suggestion, that every club have a code of conduct that includes penalties for those who abuse the golf course, abuse another player, or heaven forbid a professional, or each other. Promoting faster pace of play. A number of the decisions that were made that drove this change, which took 7 years, by the way, are to promote faster pace of play. And you'll see. There are relaxed requirements and reduced penalties, putting green, bunkers, and accidental acts. The reason for that was the committee looked at every single rule and said, does this really impact a player's score? If the answer was no, for instance, searching for a ball in the rough and you accidentally kick it, does it really impact the player's score by kicking the ball? Not really. So all of those penalties have been eliminated. So now it's much more, I would say, friendly. There's less hidden penalties that you might stumble upon. This will probably save 3 or 4 strokes per tournament on the PGA Tour. It's that significant. When we determine who or what moved the ball at rest, we're going to be working with a concept called virtual certainty. And this is a flip-flop from the rule today, so starting January 1. Virtual certainty has always been part of the concept of the rules going back to '84. And what it meant up till now was that if a player could be wrong, the player is wrong and there's a penalty. You're laughing, but that's where a lot of the penalties on tour came from. Now it's been flopped around. Unless you can prove the player's wrong, the player's not wrong. And you're going to see an example, and then I'm going to ask you for a vote, and I've got close to half of you will think it still should be a penalty. We'll see. Penalty areas, forget hazards, they're gone. Hazards used to be water hazards and bunkers. Bunkers are now a separate rule. And we have penalty areas. It could be anything the club wants to designate. Could be desert, could be a water hazard, form a water hazard, could be just a clump of brush, could be a cliffside, could be anything at all. It's up to the club to decide. But I would caution you, and I'm going to caution the professional staff, if you were to go on, let's say, on Apache, and take all of the desert and say there are penalty areas by the definition of the edge of the turf. This is mostly for the guys. A 15 handicapper who hits the ball over 200 yards in the air is probably going to be an 11 after about 2 months. It's that impactful. It will raise the course rating, lower the slope, and the person who's fairly long and a little wild will have a huge impact on their handicap. So we're going to be cautionary now. We're not going to implement all new course ratings. There are 117 courses we'd have to do where this could impact. So what we're doing is going to ask your professional staff, talk to all of you, see what you think will work, and then we'll look at the way scores change over the first 3 or 4 months of the season. And then we'll make an adjustment to course rating that'll be more definitive in the fall. But there's some other great local rules we'll get to as well. Simplified dropping and redropping procedures. In every circumstance now that where you're going to drop a ball, there is a specific point that governs where you're going to drop. You're going to pick a point, and that point then will be, with two exceptions, a 1 club length half circle. Every drop, any rule, 1 club length half circle. The two exceptions, lateral relief, either from a penalty area, 2 club lengths, and probably ends up being a quarter circle, or for an unplayable ball. Now you have 2 club lengths, and it would be a 4 club length half circle. So 2 club lengths either way. Those are the only two that are 2 club lengths. Everything else, whether it's penalty relief or not, 1 club length half circle, and you'll see several examples. And we'll kind of beat you up and show you 3 or 4 or 5 different times. Unplayable ball in a bunker. New relief option. And it's not just unplayable, because the player determines what's unplayable. So anytime your ball's in a bunker, you can take it out of that bunker for 2. Back on a line relief, which is tall enough. It used to be drop behind, keeping the point between you. Well, it's not, just back on a line. And there's a good demonstration in there. But if you get it up in the face of a bunker, you have a bad line, a down slope, and you want to get out of the bunker, 2 strokes and you're out. And then equipment. We're going to talk about stroke and distance local rule that I'm going to suggest you consider seriously. But when it comes to equipment, you all know we can use 14 clubs. Well, there are all sorts of provisions. What happens if a club becomes non-conforming? What if it's broken? When do I replace it? When do I don't? When you choose your 14 clubs now, you're done. You break 6 of them, you're playing with 8. No matter how you break it, even in the normal course of play. So that normal course of play is out the window. You have 14 clubs, choose wisely. Any questions so far? New definitions. We actually defined a ball marker. It's a small object, and it used to be we could mark the ball with our finger or our foot. Now it has to be an object that's used to mark it. It can be a tee. We define what drop means. And this is interesting because this definition is in here because of the Chinese. Under the old rules, if you dropped the ball, it would be in play. So the way they interpreted the language, if you're walking along and accidentally drop the ball, you just put a ball in play. Well, that wasn't the intent at all. So now we say specifically that you're going to drop the ball with the intent of putting it into play. You can still get a penalty for doing something stupid, but it's not, because we're now translating into 40 languages, simple words have to be used and defined. What's embedded? We all think we know that, now it's clearly defined. The previous stroke indents the ground. It doesn't have to be in mud. It can be still in grass as long as there's an indentation in the ground in the previous stroke. No play zones, just where play is prohibited. The reference point, that's what determines where you're going to drop. And then the relief area is that 1 club length half circle, or in 2 occasions, a 2 club length half circle. The relief area, there's a relief area for every drop. And as you'll see, when you drop a ball in a relief area, the ball must be dropped in the relief area and it must stay there. So forget 2 club lengths and redropping. It's all of it. As long as it stays in that area, even if it bounces on the ground, as long as it hits the ground without hitting you, and then it hits you or something else, it's still in play as long as it's in that area and you play it. Again, no penalty, because when was the last time that a ball bounced off the player and it helped him? Question. Was that a question, or you just waving at your friends? Okay. Careful, I might call on you next. The general area of the course. Used to be called through the green, now it's the general area. We have teeing area, putting green of the hole being played, all bunkers, penalty areas. That's the whole golf course. Notice no fairway or rough, although the word fairway is used in some of the rules. So you drop to hold the ball, let go of it so that it falls through the air with the intent for the ball to be in play. It's kind of common sense, but when you translate into a bunch of different languages, it doesn't work. We talk about penalty areas. 1 stroke relief from penalty errors. All the way through the rules now, accidental actions are rarely penalized if it's accidental. I'll give you an example. I'm tending the flagstick, and I'm tending it for you. You see me tending it, which means I'm your agent. Today, old rules, if I stand here and the ball hits the flagstick, I forget to pull it out. You say, why did you pull it out? Well, it was going too fast. Okay, that's a penalty. Now, I'm holding this flagstick, and one of these Air Force jets takes off, and they go like this. And the ball hits the flagstick, the player is exempt from penalty because it was accidental. I didn't do it on purpose. So it's whether it's purposeful or accidental, deliberate or accidental. And when we talk about players marking the ball, as an example, I'm walking up to my ball in the fairway, and I'm carrying my bag. And I put the bag down, and the bag falls and hits my ball. Today, 1-stroke penalty. Next year, no problem, put the ball down. No problem. Did I help myself by having the ball hit the bag hit the ball? No. So that's gone. Actually, I really like this.
On accidental, I've heard that the thing would stay in the whole time.
The flagstick?
Yeah. That's not accidental, I know it's been so my mom was accidental.
You may leave the flagstick in any time you want. You just can't position it in the position to assist you outside of the center of the hole. So you're going to be able to leave the flagstick in, and we'll see an example of that. But just think for a second. Let's fast forward 5 months. Augusta, last round of the Masters. Flag in the 9th green, left center. Player gets it to the back of the green. You think that flagstick's going to get pulled? We ought to have a little wager in the first player to figure that out. We're going to accept the player's reasonable judgment. Now, what does that mean? As long as you're not trying to do something wrong, you're going to be judged to be correct. And here's a great one. Remember the lady on the LPGA who was penalized for putting her ball back in the wrong place? Lexi Thomas. Okay, I want to ask you, because the player's reasonable judgment is now the governing factor, replacing a ball in its original spot, at that level of play, was she showing the kind of discretion necessary for a professional player?
Yes.
How many think yes?
Yes.
How many think no? Pretty close to 50-50. The Rules Committee would have adjudged her to be in violation because she put it down and didn't put it down carefully. When you're playing for money on the tour, you're expected to make a reasonably good effort to get the ball in the right place, where she just kind of carelessly put it down. Now, if that happens in a member guest, that's fine, as long as you're not being purposely careless. So there's a degree of responsibility that goes with the different levels of play now, in the judgment of whoever is going to be doing your ruling. Reasonable judgment.
Yeah, but what about the camera work and so forth? And then,
Well, what about camera work? That's out the window.
and then penalizing the next day
Two questions. What about camera work? What about penalizing the next day? First of all, if the player violated a rule, they're going to be penalized up till the time the trophies are worn. So that's going to carry over, but it won't be. There's no additional scorecard penalty. The player's just going to add the penalty strokes for whatever happened. As far as camera work is concerned, on the tours now, they have a person watching the feed inside the TV trucks, so they're not taking any phone calls. But that doesn't mean that 3 spectators at the 8th green would see an obvious mistake by a player, bring it up to a rules official, and that might cause a penalty to be applied later. Because when we're talking reasonable judgment, let's see. So long as the player does what can be reasonably expected under the circumstances to make an accurate determination. We're going to talk a little bit about this later. What does that mean? That means if 3 people see something happen and you, the player, say it didn't happen, 3-1 wins. It happened. Your reasonable judgment is not your sole privilege, but what's reasonable for the circumstances. Where's the weight of the evidence? 3-1 wins. 2-1 wins most times. You know, you might remember on a PGA Tour last year, there was a player who refused to sign a scorecard for another player. He said he took advantage. He was up 80 yards in front of where the marker said the ball crossed the line of the hazard. Well, the rules official came out and, without calling him out, he said, no, one player against the player wins, no penalty. That was not a correct decision. But it's a lot more clear now that the player must get all evidence available before making a determination. So it's a little more clearly stated. Everybody has to play by the rules, so that if somebody purposely violates a rule, now it's clearly stated that player is going to be disqualified. Clearly stated.
So, question about Mickelson hitting a moving putt at the U.S. Open.
Great question. I love that question. There was I was there on the rules committee. I've been doing that since '81. And there was a fellow named David Bonsall, who's the chairman of the R&A Rules Committee, who was at that meeting. And as Mickelson walked off the green, this is a quote from David. He said, Mickelson came up to him and said, David, I don't know what happened there, but just catch up with me and tell me what I need to do. So the explanation we got in the scoring tent or in the media room was slightly different from the reality of the golf course. But a lot of people felt like Mickelson should have been disqualified under the spirit of the game. I'll tell you why not. Well, first of all, there was a rule that covered it, but beyond that, just the appearance was so bad that many people felt that was overboard. Had he taken, let the ball go, and taken stroke and distance, he could have replaced it where he had putted it from. And he would have saved himself 2 or 3 strokes. Did he take advantage of the rules? He penalized himself at least 2, maybe 3 strokes. You don't get disqualified for hurting yourself. So the philosophy under the rules is you're going to be penalized for taking advantage or gaining an advantage, but not for being stupid. Yes, ma'am.
What about throwing clubs?
What about throwing clubs? That's why there should be a local rule in effect, and there's actually some guidance in here as to what it should be. If a person tosses a club in a bag, the advice is, depends how far, it really shouldn't be a penalty. If they throw the club at the bag, are they acting reasonably? No. Probably not. That's good for a 1-stroke penalty. If they throw the club at a person, that's a good reason for a DQ. If they throw it hard at a bag and it bounces up and hits a person, maybe they add 2. Up to the staff to determine how you deal with that. But the point is, there are certain actions in golf that just shouldn't be there. And now there's a way to the rules to cover it. You all with me there?
So when Rory McIlroy threw his 2 or 3 iron into the lake.
When Rory threw his 2 or 3 iron in the lake, well, first of all, it was a bad club. Now we'd be down to 13. Was he endangering anyone?
No.
Was it a bad act?
Yes.
Maybe you had one.
Yes.
Maybe you had one. You have, John Daly, was it about 20 years ago, decided to hit a 3-wood up over a grandstand down the road. You're endangering people. So, but that's up to all of you to decide how to deal with that. Player integrity. You don't have to announce if you're going to lift the ball to identify it, see if the rules, if it's damaged. You don't have to do that. We're going to assume, the rules always said we assume integrity on behalf of the player. Now it's part of the rule. You don't have to announce it. because you probably don't want to be checking to identify your ball every time it's in the draw. And this is one rule that the tour, both the European Tour and the PGA Tour, are having heartburn over. Because they know they have some bad actors out there. But with television and all these cameras, they're going to be caught and they're going to be disqualified now. So it'll take care of itself. And really, did many people gain an advantage? How many people replaced the ball in the right place? Like I thought. So the code of conduct should go into effect immediately. Also, we're going to suggest you have a pace of play rule.
The order of play would.
Let me get back and see if I can make this.
It is important that you are aware of how your pace of play impacts others. The 2019 rules encourage prompt pace of play by all players, by recommending that you play promptly throughout the round, such as by preparing in advance for each stroke, moving at a good pace between strokes and between holes, and that you make a stroke in no more than 40 seconds.
Some people think 40 seconds is quick.
You know, on tour, you know, they penalize everybody in the group. This has never made sense to me. So when you have one guy creating all the problems, is that still going to be the rule, where the whole group gets penalized?
It's never been the case, except in some local amateur events.
Well, so when what's the guy's name? The U.S. Open, local guy, Sabatini did that with Crane.
Right. Then Crane.
So they could have just penalized Crane and not Sabatini?
Well, Sabatini was penalized for being a bad actor because he was so aggressive, not for pace. It was not the group that was penalized. The PGA Tour fines players; they don't penalize them. The penalties are fine. And I was sitting at a meeting on Golf 2020 about 15 years ago, and this pace of play came up, and we had a group of people that were talking about how do we get the game moving. And this is a direct quote from Tim Fincham, the former executive for the tour. He said, "I don't care how long it takes them to play. Every extra minute they're on television is more sponsorship for me." And yet, there's where the problem is, because where do most people get their information about golf? From television. So.
The order of play when starting a hole depends on who has the iron. After that, it is based on which ball is farthest from the hole. In stroke play, however, there is no penalty for playing out of turn, and the 2019 rules both allow and encourage you to play ready golf, which means to play in a safe and responsible order that is most convenient and that saves time. These players agreed to play out of turn because the player farther from the hole had a difficult shot, and the other player was ready to play.
This also exists in match play. And in match play, though, it's each stroke, there has to be a question and an answer. In stroke play, you can just play whenever it's convenient to do when you don't interfere with anybody. And so it's a little more like the ready golf you've seen promoted. The idea is as long as you don't interfere with someone. But in match play now, you can agree to play out of turn as long as it's for each individual stroke, there's a question and an answer, and you don't do it too often. It's for convenience and saving time, like somebody's going to run up to get a hot dog at the turn or something like that. That's what it's for. Or somebody's in a deep bunker and wants to take a minute or two to get organized, and somebody else is closer but has a putt on the green, and you can say, yeah, go ahead and putt, and I'll go around and figure out my bunker shot. So that's the intent in match play. And we're going to talk about that in a minute too.
Is the time that you have to hit the ball in match play different than in stroke play?
Is the time different in match play and stroke play? No.
why did you say a minute or two then when you only have 40 seconds?
I said a minute or two?
Yeah, to go look at the bar.
Well, if it's a difficult shot, you know, like I can think of a bunker at PGA West that would take me a good 5 minutes just to find the bottom of it. And I didn't mean a minute or two that you get to delay. What we're going to look at, for the sake of our championships here in the USGA qualifiers, you should play in 40 seconds. If you go over 60, we're going to look at that as starting to tread in penalty area. And don't forget, when you're delaying play, it's not just the people behind you, it's also the people you're playing with. And so if, as we see, we do about 16 collegiate events every year. The kids are fine, the coaches are awful. With this local rule, the way we're going to monitor slow play this year, the penalties will be applied, and if the coach is out there deciding they have write a book with this player, it could be 2 or it could be 4. We could add up pretty quickly. Mm. 3 minutes to look for a lost ball. Where did 3 minutes come from? Well, the RNA did a 2-year study. They love to do studies. They took all their championships and they timed ball searches. And what they discovered was that in almost 90%, with the high 80s, 87% of the time, that a ball that was playable was found within 3 minutes. Rarely was it found after that and still playable. Mm-hmm. So that's how they came up with 3.
The rules permit you to freely exchange advice with your caddy or partner, but you are required to act alone when making a stroke. Under the 2019 rules, once you start taking your stance for a stroke, neither your caddy nor partner are allowed to stand behind you.
You're going to save an hour on the LPGA. Notice they said when a player begins to take their stance. What does that mean? When you're near enough to the ball that your feet, or one of your feet, is in a position where you could assume the stance, or it could be used in the stance, that's the beginning. In the general area, except on the putting green, once if a person's behind me, once my foot is in that position, I can't undo it, automatic penalty. Can't undo it. On the putting green, that's different. As long as you move off a spot on the putting green, you're going to be okay. Difference between the putting green and somewhere else on the golf course. And this includes standing up. You'll see a bunch of people that like to put a club down along your toe line and see where you're lined up. That's a violation. So you can't get any assistance in alignment. You're going to have to figure it out yourself. That's a big change. Huge change to the tour. Now, I'll give you a hint. A person can't stand behind you. So my partner has a 6-foot putt for par. There's nothing wrong with me standing on the other side of the hole and lining them up and staying there. So that's worth a drink at the bar. I'm sure there are going to be some people who are going to be able to get on that. It's the line of play that's sacrosanct, which is from an extension behind the player all the way to the hole. It ends at the hole. Yes, sir.
Player uses their shaft on their hips or shoulder when they're addressing the ball, that's still allowed because they're not on the ground, letting go of the ball.
Player puts the shaft here or aligns the shoulders.
Yeah.
That decision has not been made yet. There's the indications are that it will not be a penalty, but we haven't seen the final yet. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm going to cut to your part. You can't stand behind me and tell me to move my putter, but you could stand there and tell me to move my putter?
No, I just said on the putting green I can do that as long as I move. It's any place but the putting green that I can't stand behind you while you're setting up.
So
On the putting green, the caddy or your partner can stand behind you as long as they move before you make a stroke. But on the golf course, elsewhere, other than the putting green, if a person stands behind you and I take one step into my stance, 2-stroke penalty. Immediately.
The person is still behind you and you make a step.
Person's still behind. You're behind me. I'm getting ready. I'm going to hit it this way. And my ball, let's say, is right here. I get here. That foot is in a position where I could assume a stance.
So the person behind you should have moved prior to that.
Person behind me must move before I get 1 foot in position. Automatic penalty. Now, 2 strokes or loss of hole match.
That's a huge penalty.
Huge penalty. It's important to note that you won't see much of a definition for partner in the rules unless you read them carefully. When you have the word player anywhere in the rules now, it's equal to partner. So where it used to be that only the player could drop the ball, now the partner can also drop the ball. Whatever the player can do, the partner can do. That doesn't go all the way to the caddy, although we're going to see he gets a few extra things he can do now.
Under the 2019 rules, when your ball is on the putting green, your caddy is allowed to mark, lift, and clean it, with or without your approval. If your caddy has marked and lifted your ball, it can be replaced by either you or your caddy.
Key element, the player can always replace the ball no matter how it was moved or who moved it. The player can always replace the ball. So right now, if the ball is moved, then it's going to be replaced by the player. Partner equals player, so player, partner, or the person who lifted it or moved it. So when the ball's replaced, to have that third one, it has to be authorized, or let's say somebody kicks the ball in the rough and said, oh, it was right here. That person can put it back because they have the best information. Here we are putting with a flag stick in the hole. It's okay. There's an optional local rule for stroke and distance. We'll have a little video of that later. See the gray area? You're going to have a huge area to drop under this rule, but it's with a 2-stroke penalty.
Question.
Yes?
Someone's attending the pin, grabs the pin, is there a decision that can be made, they not pull it, or they have to pull it, or once it's attended, what's up with that?
What definition of attended means in a position to reach out and touch the flag stick. So whether I'm holding it or not, if I'm in a position to reach out and touch it, I'm attending it. Now, was that with the player's authorization or not? Is the player aware? When that person acts, is it deliberate or accidental? Those are the questions that you have to ask if the ball hits the flag stick.
So I'm just saying that, can somebody make a decision after you struck the ball? You don't say, pull it for me, and they basically, pull it if it looks like it's going to help it.
So the player has not authorized someone to attend the flag stick. The ball's heading for the flag, and another player runs over and lifts it up. Is that what your question is?
No, mine is your partner, somebody else is on the screen, is tending it for you.
Okay.
And it's coming up and you say, gee, pull it if it looks like it's going to help. I think, is there a decision that can be made
Once the ball is struck, no decision can be made. If it's tended, then the caddy or the partner will have to take the flag stick out, unless it's accidentally left in because of that jet going overhead. So accidental, purposeful.
Did you also mention,
Sticks in the hole.
did you also mention that can someone, if it's leaning in the wind, hold it straight up and down?
If it's leaning in the wind, can someone hold it straight up and down? No. You cannot take an action to benefit your player by positioning the flag stick. It can be set in the bottom of the hole. Now, let's say if it's leaning, it's not all the way down, and it's leaning to your advantage. You can tell everybody not to touch it because you think it's going to help. You don't have to center it in the hole. But if you move it, it has to be centered in the hole. Okay? Simplified dropping. We're going to always drop from knee height. Now, you probably heard for about 2 years they were talking about dropping from an inch off the ground. Like my grandfather said, you know, if it looks really stupid, don't do it. And so this actually makes sense, and they'll give a bit of an explanation.
When dropping your ball under the new rules, the likelihood you'll need only one drop will increase, while the randomness of your resulting line will be preserved. The procedure is simple. Hold the ball at knee height, let go of it so it falls straight down, and make sure that it lands and comes to rest in the relief area. Don't throw, roll, or spin the ball, and don't let it hit you as it falls.
So there are only 2 times you're going to re-drop. The first is if it hits you on the way down. The second one is if it comes to rest outside the relief area. The rest of the time, you're just going to play the ball. There's some good diagrams from there.
So if it hits the ground and then hits you, you play it as it lies.
If it hits the ground and then hits the player, as long as it stays in the relief area, you're good to go.
So if they're dropping the ball, let's say around the middle here, do their feet have to be fully clear of the
Great question. Any free relief must be complete relief if possible. So any free relief has to be complete relief. Where would it not be complete relief? In a bunker. But anywhere else, you have to take complete relief, which means stance, ball, area of swing. So if you were to take relief from a cart path or ground repair, and then your heel of your shoe is touching it when you make a stroke, you have not taken complete relief. So you played from the wrong place, attitude, or loss of ball.
But in that situation, the gal dropped a ball in which her feet would still be in the hazard, or whatever they call it now.
Yeah, your first example shows
The first example shows her dropping a ball right here first. Her feet will be, were still, if you show her she dropped it.
You can't, well, a couple of different things here. Penalty areas are different. We're talking about free relief having complete relief.
Right.
Penalty relief, you're only talking about the ball. For instance, you take an unplayable in the desert and you drop 2 club lengths away and it rolls back into that unplayable line, you're there.
Yeah.
You're there. You don't get relief, complete relief. As long as you drop it in the relief area, it stays there. But we're going to see that that's going to be almost impossible in the future.
Question.
Yes, sir.
So you can go to the furthest away from the 2 club lengths. Let's say you got fluffy rough and you want to place it, but you go right to the very far edge, drop it, it hops an inch out of the area. Now you're allowed to put it back in and place it and tee it up.
You all hear that? I have a 2 club length area or 2 club length relief from a penalty area. So basically I have a quarter circle. Okay, so I know that if I have to drop the ball in that area and it has to stay in that area, there's a little bit of a slope. So I go out 1.99 club lengths and I drop it and it jumps outside. Do I have to re-drop it? Yes. If it does it again, you're going to place it where it hit the ground. So the rules can work for the player if you're intelligent enough to take advantage of it. The other side of that is on, let's say on an unplayable, I take the lateral relief, so I have 2 club lengths one way, 2 club lengths the other, big half circle. If I drop it at one extremity, it can go almost 4 club lengths and still be in play. You can go all the way to the other side of that relief area. As long as it's in the same relief area, you're good to go. So there really shouldn't be any reason that a player gets a ball in the wrong place under these rules. We're going to talk a minute about what happens when you have to pick your reference point.
What happens then in an unplayable line? You go back as far as you want, and then you still have that 4 club length semicircle to drop it?
Talking about going back in a line for an unplayable, you go back as far as you want. Now it's 1 club length. There are only 2 instances you get 2 club lengths. That's for lateral relief for an unplayable, not back on the line relief, only lateral relief, or lateral relief from a penalty area. Those are the only two instances where you're coming out sideways, not going back. When you go back, it's one club length either side in a semicircle.
What's the reason behind that?
What's the reason behind it? As opposed to placing the ball,
No, as opposed to 2 versus 1. Why are the exceptions made for the lateral relief?
because when you're, why are there exceptions for lateral relief? Every other time under the rules that one club length relief is going to give you one club length either direction, 2 club lengths across, half circle.
Okay.
When you're working with a penalty area or lateral relief, you might only have a quarter circle to deal with.
Okay.
So they wanted to give enough room, and most of the time when you're taking penalty relief, it's a pretty bad situation. A little more leeway.
Okay.
The alternative to that, and they talked about this actually for 3 years, was always placing the ball. And that just didn't work. Okay, knee height, standing erect, wherever your knee is. And don't forget, they said the player's reasonable judgment will be accepted. You'll see a couple of times where the person doesn't quite get it to knee height. As long as they're not trying to take advantage, that's okay.
Can you go above knee height if you're hoping to get it to roll out of the area?
Can you go up and drop it here? Oh, sure. You just have to add one.
So where does it become a penalty if you're 6 inches above your knee? That's not allowed.
When does it become a penalty? When is the player not acting reasonably for the situation? Judgment call, gray area. So what's your intent? You know, Mrs. Smith, why did you drop it from your waist? Well, I can't bend over. I just had an operation. Okay, well, make your best effort. Maybe lean a little bit more next time. It's all what's reasonable. For some people, it's pretty hard to drop from knee height. Now, this is a relief area definition. I'm going to read it to you. It's a little hard to see. This is really important. This is going to prevent you from ever getting a penalty. The area where a player must drop a ball when taking relief under a rule is the relief area. Each relief rule requires the player to use a specific relief area, size and location. 3 factors. A reference point. You're always going to have to choose a reference point, which is replacing nearest point of relief, or the place where your ball entered the penalty area, or where your ball is unplayable. You have a reference point. Now, if the player is dropping back on a line and doesn't choose the point, doesn't specifically choose a point, then where the ball is dropped will choose the point for you. There will always be a reference point, even if the player, as you saw in one of the examples, the girl just picked the ball off the path and dropped it. You don't have to pick a point, but if you don't, then that point will be chosen for you, and if you make a mistake, you're going to be playing from the wrong place. So it's always going to be good to mark an area or say, I'm going to use that. All you have to do is be specific. You can even say it to yourself. There's a little brown spot, that's my relief point. That's my reference point. That's good enough. As long as you have something you can defend yourself with. Yes?
So the last line is a change in the rules, correct? Couldn't you use a long putter previously?
We'll get to that. The size of the relief area is measured from the reference point. It's either 1 or 2 club lengths, and that club is the longest club in your bag except for a putter. Longest club in your bag except for a putter. And even if you use a short club, like right now I could use a short club if I wanted to roll outside of 2 club lengths and take advantage. Your relief area is always determined by the longest club in your bag, even if you don't use that club to measure. So if it's close to making a mistake, you might have to pull it out and measure to see whether or not you have to redrop. But it's always that one club.
To determine whether you get relief, you still have to take your stance with the club most likely to use.
You still have to take the stance with the club you're most likely to use when choosing free relief, and the answer is yes. Because there's a difference in where your nearest point, your reference point would be, whether you're hitting a sandwich or a free relief. So yes, you must do that.
But once you pick the point, then that club is not mandatory to use for measurement?
Once you pick the point, that club's not mandatory to use for measurement.
For the two club lengths?
It's always the driver or your longest club, 3-wood if you don't have a driver. So you never, again, have to choose a club. It is chosen for you when you start the round. Longest club in your bag except for a putter. Everybody comfortable with that?
I have a
Question?
If you said I'm going to use my 3-wood and there's my point relief, and for whatever reason you drop it in the rolls and there is what you can use it anymore, I'm going to use the pitch wedge or the roll. You don't have to continue using it.
I'm talking about changing clubs and measuring. Doesn't matter what club you use.
Not measuring, but
In
you
the
said I
stroke.
use the 3-wood for my reference point.
Your point really.
Yeah, once you choose a legitimate reference point to take relief, let's say, I choose the 3-wood, and I get my reference point for the shot I want to hit. And then the ball drops and it jumps into high grass, so I have to hit a pitching wedge. That's still my reference point.
But I can switch. I don't have
You
to.
can switch clubs, you do not have to play the club you use. And in certain circumstances, you might take a wedge and it drops into a good area, now I want to hit 3-wood, and my feet are back on the path. That's a new situation, and I can hit the ball. Because I chose a reference point, I dropped within the rules, the ball was in play, and I changed clubs for a very good reason. Not an artificial reason. Again, we're trusting the player's integrity.
So you can stand on the path.
So then, in that case, you can stand on the path because it is a new situation, which I've reached by following the rules. Yes.
Also,
Here.
do you still have the option of going to either side of the lateral?
You still have the option of going to either side of a lateral hazard. We're going to talk about that in a second. The answer is maybe. It's not a local rule. It's not part of the rules of golf. So if you want to have opposite margin, that has to be a local rule. Yes, sir.
Just because you change clubs there and now your feet, as you're going to play the ball, are on the path, even though you may have designated a relief point and dropped, you can redrop now because your feet are on the path.
Right. You have a new situation.
So you can redrop.
In fact, I'll give you an example of Mickelson using the rules. It was a Colonial, and he was coming down the last hole, and he had left his second shot just short left of the green, and Colonial has a pretty severely sloped green on 18 with a water hazard right to the left of it. And he was in some high grass. Casual water, and there was a sprinkler head. And so the rules official came over, and Mickelson was looking around, and the fellow goes over and says, well, here's your nearest point. Mickelson said, no, it isn't. It's right here. Well, what do you mean? You're still in the casual water. I'm taking relief for the sprinkler head. If you have two situations, it's up to the player to determine which to use. So what Mickelson did is he took relief from the sprinkler head, backed up his one club length, dropped it in the casual water, which is now temporary water. Not casual, that didn't translate to Chinese. And then took the casual water relief and got out of the rough and got to the fairway, pitched it up, pulled it, won the tournament by stroke. So you can use the rules to your advantage. And under the current rules, there are fewer times when that works, but it's still there in a couple of situations. So always look at what your options are. When we're doing rules, especially at a tournament like the Open or the Amateur, the player doesn't call for a ruling unless they know they're in trouble. So when you go up, you just say, how can I help you? Well, I'm going to drop it here. Is that okay?
So a swimming pool is temporary now?
A swimming pool of temporary water? Could be. I don't know. Do you empty it? Or is it there all year long? So it's up to the players to determine whether or not they want to take advantage of a rule. Just because a player says, can I drop it here? If the answer is yes, then say yes and leave. If he's smart, he's going to say, what are my options? And then I'll give him the whole gamut of it. But otherwise, I'd be offering him advice to say something different. There's a question here, I think?
Yes, as far as making some of those rulings that somewhat became complicated, like the Sergio, what that was spent on a park path, possible to take relief
talking about a tour player wanting to take, or somebody taking relief and then switching left-handed to right-handed. You can only do that when that is clearly the best option. So if I'm up against a boundary wall, and left-handed or right-handed, I could chip it out 20 yards, probably get to the same place. But I say I'm going to play it left-handed, I'm a right-handed player. I'm going to play it left-handed so I can stand on the bat, get free relief. No. Has to be the only option. I'm up against a tree, and I'm a right-handed player, and there's no way to swing it right hand, left-handed. Now it becomes the only option. Now if I'm standing on a sprinkler head, I get relief. Only option, switching right to left. Even if you're equally good both directions, once you start the round, you're committed to that style of play for the round.
Really?
A couple of tour players tried to do that a little bit differently. In fact, some of you might remember the name Johnny Bullock. That was one he tried back in the 30s. Didn't work then either. Okay, the ball must land in and come to rest in the relief area where it was dropped, or else it must be redropped. A second time it happens, you place it. No redrop requirement if it accidentally hits a person or object after hitting the ground. Purposeful, there's going to be a penalty applied. Accidental, no penalty. If the drop ball comes to us outside the relief area, it must be dropped a second time. If it happens a second time, you know, I take that 2 club lengths, I go out an inch from the edge, and it goes out twice, I get to place it. And my reasonable judgment on where to place it will be accepted.
When you drop in relief areas defined by 1 or 2 club lengths, in the 2019 rules, a club length will always make the length of the longest club in your bag, except your putter. For most players, that club will be their driver, but not always. This player is using his driver to measure his 2 club length lateral relief area, outside a red penalty area. This player's back on the line relief area is 1 club length on either side of and behind the point he has chosen on the line in the hole, through where his ball was unplayable in the bunker. He is estimating the size of his relief area without measuring, then dropping well within 1 club length of that point. Finally, when a player measures with a shorter club, it is still the longest club in their bag, except the putter, that defines the relief area. Remember, when you drop, your ball must always land in, come to rest in, and be played from the relief area.
Is everybody good with that? No.
If you have a reference point, that creates your semicircle. In the video they said you must drop within a club length of that
Reference point.
So it said we also said once your ball is dropped, that creates the reference point.
Only if you haven't chosen one.
So if you've chosen one, I've got a 1 club semicircle, can I drop it right to the edge and let it roll out perfectly?
Yes.
And then I can then place it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, there's nothing in the rules that tells you where to drop in that relief area. Totally left up to the animal to figure that one out. So, right place, right time, you can work it to your advantage. No problem. No problem. Okay?
When you drop in relief areas defined by 1 or 2 club lengths, in the 2019 rules, when dropping and taking free relief or penalty relief, your ball must be dropped in the defined relief area, and it must come to rest in there too. Most of the time, with the knee-high dropping procedure, that will happen on your first drop. When it doesn't, drop a second time. If that drop doesn't stay within the relief area either, Place a ball where your second drop first touched the ground.
If he was dropping in the front of it to probably try to get to place it, he could have gone back at club length, probably would not have had to have done that. And notice when you're taking your reference point, that reference point is going to be the nearest point in free relief, the nearest point to the ball where you can play without interference. The nearest point to the ball where you can play without interference. So if I don't mark that, I'm still okay as long as I can defend that where I'm playing my ball from is in a proper area. So the player's reasonable judgment is acceptable.
In the 20.
When the 2019 rules let you lift your ball to take relief instead of playing it as it lies, you will be allowed to either use your original ball or substitute and use a different ball. In the 2019 rules, you are allowed to substitute a ball when taking free relief, as well as when taking penalty relief. This player is substituting a ball when taking free relief from a card path.
Anytime you take relief, anytime you're going to drop a ball, you can change balls. You cannot change balls in the putting green. Only when taking relief.
It doesn't have to be damaged.
It does not have to be damaged. No longer. Yes, sir.
The ball that you took out of play, is that out of play now?
Is that ball out of play? No, the player can put it back into play. Once you take a ball out of play, if you're allowed to, let's say she skulls this one, she can take the ball she had taken out of play and put it back in. She can borrow a ball from another player. It doesn't have to be the player's ball. It's just whatever ball she drops now becomes her ball in play. Yes, ma'am.
If you replace the ball, it still needs to be the same make and model.
Does it have to be the same make and model of ball? It's never had to be except in a local rule on tour. So if you're playing a legitimate golf ball that's not one of these jet balls, you can switch Callaway, Titleist, doesn't matter. Now the tour uses a local rule that says the markings must be identical, ball to ball, other than the player number. So it has to be the same kind of ball. There was a question in the back. Okay.
Red and yellow water hazards are two things that most golfers are pretty familiar with. Now, one of the big changes in 2019, though, is the introduction of this concept of penalty areas. The ability for committees to now mark additional areas with red lines. So I think 2019 moving forward, we're actually going to see more red lines on the golf course.
I think that's correct, and we'd be happy to see that. On many golf courses around the world, we see areas such as this. The difficult areas to find your golf ball, difficult areas to play from, and by being able to mark them as red hazards, we give the player a relief option outside it. So just outside the red line, they can then drop on the penalty of one stroke within 2 club lengths of that.
I mean, this change is really all about giving some flexibility to the committee when it comes to defining the golf course. But because we are going to see more red lines, there's now the opportunity for players to find their balls in more situations. You know, similar to this, if my ball's there, I may well want to play it. Right? Under the current rules, there are a number of things I can't do. I can't ground my club or move loose impediments. All those things come 2019 as part of the rules modernization initiative. Those go away as well. So if a player wants to play their ball, they're now going to have the ability to do some things that today they wouldn't allow for. Again, I think just offering that flexibility to the player, you know, you can play the ball as it lies, you can do all these things, or you can take lead under penalty one stroke. That's all.
It is important, a key element, key theme throughout the modernisation process was trying to speed the game up. And we think that these changes in and around penalty areas will do just that, make a wonderful game just that little bit quicker, and therefore a little bit better.
Did Joe catch that? Whatever you can do in a fairway, you can do in the rough, you can do in the penalty area.
That's a big change.
Huge change.
Yeah.
Move whatever you want. You want to move rocks in the desert? Go for it. Even if it's a penalty area. You want to move rocks in a water hazard? Go ahead. Go ahead. Take a practice swing. Hit the ground. Ground your club in a penalty area, yes. Not in a bunker. Right in front of or behind the ball will get to that. Yes, ma'am. When you lift the rock around the ball and the ball moves, can you do that? Yes, you just have to add one. Now, except on the putting green. You don't have to mark your ball. If there's a leaf under your ball, you can just pull the leaf out and put the ball back. That's good enough. But except on the putting green, if you move something and your ball moves, you're still guilty. And that's one stroke.
What about a bunker?
What about a bunker? We'll get to the bunker rule in just coming up next.
Is there any change in the implications of a red versus yellow staked area?
Is there any change between red and yellow? Red and yellow don't change. What you lose with yellow is the ability to drop laterally. Now, the default marking up till now has been yellow, and you use red when that didn't work. The default marking going ahead is red, unless the hazard is so significant in the play of the hole that the committee wants to guarantee that everybody negotiates that penalty area. So you have a little pond in front of a par 3 green, then that would still be yellow. The advice would be yellow. It can be marked red though. It can be. Just you have to consider, really, why would you advantage a player who didn't play a good shot?
But the rules with respect to either of the two don't change.
The rules generally don't change. Correct. Okay? Yes, sir.
Was there any consideration given to removing yellow stakes entirely?
Was there consideration of removing yellow entirely? Yes, there was, except for that situation where you have a steep slope in front of a par 3 green, a water hazard, and the ball lands over and then rolls back in. The committee, the rules committee, decided that that's still an option they wanted to leave to the committee, the club, to say you have to negotiate that penalty area in the play of the hole. So, but it's an option that probably won't be used a lot. And that's about the only time I'd recommend using it now, is where it's very close to the green, and it's such a significant obstacle that you want every player to deal with.